Yo, welcome to Sig Slayers, the comic interview show, period. I'm Mike the Sig Slayer, chilling with Mark the Honorable Villain. What up, fam?
What's up, Mike? We got a true OG with us today, man. The godfather of digital coloring. Let him know who we got, man.
Today we have pioneer artist Steve Oliff with us. But before we chat with Steve, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and please comment. All right, our next guest is a pioneer. He was one of, if not the first digital color artist in comics, three-time Eisner Award winner for being the best colorist in the game, four-time Harvey Award winner. This man has been a part of iconic works like Akira, Cosmic Odyssey, and the launch of Spawn. Ladies and gentlemen of the Stash Land, we bring to you the one and only Steve Oliff. What's up, Steve?
Hi, man.
Man, this is fantastic, man. Hey, we're so hyped to have you here, Steve. It's such an honor to have you on. We're going to just dive right on in. Okay, so Steve, since it's your first time joining us, we like to ask everybody their comic book origin story. In other words, how did you get your first gig in pro comics?
Wow. Okay. It kind of was a long roundabout sort of way. I was a comic book fan. I learned color in the third grade when I got Spider-Man #1 and Spider-Man #2 and the Avengers and all that stuff. My mom was an artist, and she gave me 128 Prismacolor artist quality colored pencils. I mean, where all the kids around me had 8 crayons, and then I learned color theory from the bottom of a Play-Doh pack, and so I just fell in love with Spider-Man and the X-Men and Avengers and Fantastic Four because I was their target audience in 1963, and so then I just kept drawing, and then met some people and started going to Comic-Con down in San Diego, and then you start meeting people, and then I do a little bit here and there.
Around what time was this? Around what time was the San Diego?
San Diego, the first year I went there was 74.
That was one of the first years there.
I think maybe the second or third year at least. I mean, I'm not sure, but anyway, I started meeting all these different artists like Frank Sirocco and Gary Winnick and Brent Anderson, and then one thing led to another, and I colored a Neil Adams thing for them for their fanzine called Venture. It was Venture #5, had this sexy Neil Adams chick and this blue alien, but because they didn't want me to color on the original art, I learned how to color on a photostat with water-soluble felt pens, okay? And nobody else really knew how to do that. And I came up with this technique where I would use Q-tips. I would wet them with that, and then these felt pens, I could blend them on this slick photostat paper. And then I'd learned from Richard Corbin that there was such a thing as an airbrush. And so I used that, and not many people were using airbrush back in those days. So it turned out, after doing that Venture cover and a couple of little things kind of by the way, I lived in kind of the North Bay, San Francisco, North Bay area, up in Mendocino County now. I'm 120 miles north of San Francisco, right on the ocean, Redwood country. Anyhow, so there was this publisher named Byron Price. He was the first guy doing graphic novel stuff. And Howard Chaykin needed an assistant to work on helping him with the coloring there. So Byron flew me to New York. I lived out in Queens at Howard Chaykin's mother's spare bedroom, took the subway down to his studio every day, and then we finished the graphic novel. And when that job was done, that was like the October of 1978, he took me around and said, "I don't have any more work for you, Steve." So took me to DC. They didn't have anything for me, but there was this brand new kind of thing happening. That was the Hulk magazine, the full color Hulk. That was when the TV show was on, Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno. Well, Jim Shooter, that is, wanted to do sort of an upscale, a little bit more slick magazine. So, because there were no full color comics other than Heavy Metal at the time. Yeah. So all their coloring was done on photostats. And I was one of the only people who really knew how to work on photostats. And so I got the job, and one of the pages that I sent to you was the very first page of my career, really, for Marvel, was Bill Sienkiewicz's very first page of Moon Knight.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was in Hulk number 13, 1978.
Fantastic.
So that's how I got started.
So 78. Now we're moving 10 years to 88.
Okay.
You being one of the first digital color artists. Well, we interviewed Alex Sinclair a few months back, and he had to learn back on Photoshop 1. That was in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
What were you using in 1988?
Well, I was using some proprietary weirdo software called Pixelcraft, which later became known as the Cod Barrett system. It was a vector-based program when Photoshop was still a gleam in a designer's eye that was nowhere to be found. But I'd been trying to get computers into comics since 1984, because I saw a little paint program on an Atari 800, which I bought because I was working with this guy who worked for Apple, and so we would messed around with this. So I would play Centipede and Space Invaders, but there was this paint program. I said, you could get 256 colors. And I was just blown away. You couldn't print it out. You couldn't do anything with it. But I said, I have a feeling computers can color comics. So for the next decade or 6 or 7 years, I went to a bunch of computer shows, and Ole Optics on Akira was the first comic book colored with computers, except for one little aberration. Mike Science Crash, the Iron Man graphic novel.
Yeah.
But it's because of that book that I got the gig to color on Akira. And it's a weird long story, so I won't go there, but I'll let you know that basically Mike Science screwed my guys out of their job because he'd been promoting it. And but Mike Science was always a Macintosh guy. And the guy who developed my software was a PC guy. So at the last minute, Mike dumped my guy. Kenny Giordano was his name, by the way, and went with this buddy who made this really crappy color program. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Iron Man Crash graphic novel, but it sucks. It's terrible, But in the meantime, I got the gig to do Akira because this guy needed somebody to showcase his software. So we worked out a deal, and he sent me a machine and everything. And so then we colored Akira #1, and as they say, the rest is history.
Well, Steve, you already answered one of my questions, but I want to ask, what was the manga or Japanese comic scene like in the States during the 1980s when you're coloring Akira? Did people really know?
It was non-existent. Didn't exist at all. But because Otomo was doing the anime version of Akira, he got in touch with Archie Goodwin up at the Epic line at Marvel and wanted to do, because it's thousands of pages long, the Akira saga, printed here in America. But he didn't think the American audience would accept a black and white comic. So they decided they were going to color it. And apparently Otomo had seen some of my work through, like on Time Spirits in particular, my buddy Thomas Yates, I don't know. Anyway, and he liked it. So I got the tryout. They sent me 4 pages, and I'd never heard of Akira.
Yeah.
No clue. But I had this feeling, I said, I don't know why, but this feels like an important job. So I did my best on my tryout pages. I'd used my airbrush, I used Pantone films, I just kicked ass on it. And then sure enough, I got the job. And we were going to do it like flat color, like at the time, remember the big dots and the old school coloring back in the 70s?
Right.
80s? Flat color. But so I just didn't like that. And I knew I had this guy with this software. So I talked to Marvel. I said, hey, can we do a tryout? Maybe it could be cooler because we'll have a lot more colors to use. All right. So Marvel went for it. and we had to negotiate the price a little bit. But once they saw the results, they loved it. It was so much better than because instead of having 64 colors, we could have 5 million colors.
Oh, wow.
A little bit of a difference.
Right. Okay, you're a 3-time Eisner Award winner. You have been an example for color artists for a couple generations now. Reflecting on your career, is that a big deal to you to have that kind of impact on the genre?
Oh, I love it. I mean, yeah, it did. Well, I set out to change the industry. I really had it in my mind that it needed to take a next level up. And so but over the years, I mean, I did every different style of coloring that you can imagine. From the original stuff at Marvel, I called it the double print black system. I mean, I used that for the first graphic novel Marvel ever did, the Death of Captain Marvel. I used that system on the X-Men graphic novel, God Loves, Man Kills, all of those things. But then there was the blue lines that came along around the time of Dark Knight and stuff. And then the gray lines. And then there were these other weirdo systems that, I mean, maybe I used it for one job because somebody came up with an idea, but I kept feeling like there's something better out there. And that's when, I did pursue the computer stuff. And anyway, but yeah, no, I've been very gratified when I go to conventions now. When people come up with this stuff that I haven't seen in 25 years, and they're still loving it,
I mean, it stands the test of time, man. I mean, you're working on Spawn 1, for example. Spawn is the longest independent superhero comic of all time now.
Yep.
Reflecting on your career, going back at that time when you were working with Todd, did you feel that it was a big deal then?
I could tell Image was a big deal. I mean, I started seeing, Todd approached me before issue number 1, but he said it's probably going to sell pretty well, and then it sold, what, 1.5 million or something?
Yeah.
Some big thing. But what I really am happy about is that we had a couple of years of Akira under our belt before the Image explosion happened. And by the way, I live in a town of 500 people. I mean, and I've been here all this time, but I had more talent in this stupid little town than most people can find, in the big cities. It was a miracle that I had these people I've been working with, and we refined our skills. We knew how to dial it in. And so by the time Spawn came along, we were rocking. And just to let you know, in the early days of Image, even though Joe Chida was doing a lot of color guides and stuff, Ole Optics was coloring or color separating 80 to 85% of the entire Image line that first couple of years.
Really?
Yeah.
Steve, talk to us about...
Eventually Photoshop came along. Yeah, Mark.
Sorry. Here, Steve, talk to us about your character Armature. That's such a unique design. What were the visual inspirations behind Armature?
Well, that is actually due to my son. He would come into my studio while I was working, coloring, whatever project I was. And then he was always very creative. So he took a piece of wire, a little copper wire, and he made an armature. Oh, he made a little human figure kind of, but it didn't have a head. And it sat on my desk for months until I finally looked at it and I put a piece of Sculpey clay and kind of made the ears and stuff. And then the character came alive from there. So he just a random thing that my son put there. And then once I started working on him, he kind of has evolved over the years.
Is it true that you published Armature in the local newspaper?
Yes. One of the things that happened, I hold on a second, let's see if I did Armature. This, I don't know if, I guess you can see this. This was, I had 2 versions. I sold out, I printed one, issue number 1, and it sold out 17,000 copies. For an independent back in the day, that wasn't too bad. And then published the second printing, and then I got the second issue done, and it turned out nobody was getting my story, and I realized I was going in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And then due to back in the day in publishing, I don't know if you know, Diamond publishers, distributors. Yeah. If you were late on your issue, they would hold the money until they got all their returns. So I was late on issue number 2, so Diamond sat on my money for 8 months. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't keep going forward. But then I realized, all right, let me backtrack a little bit. And so I decided that I needed to write better and learn how to draw better. So, because that was one of the problems. So I approached my local newspaper about publishing it. And for 13 years, I did the comics strip weekly. And what I discovered is having that regular deadline, having to get the thing done. And then, I mean, like some days I'd wake up at 10 in the morning. I'm going like, I need to have something in by 4 o'clock this afternoon. And I'd come up with something. And then because if it's a comic strip, you can't be too wordy. You have to boil your ideas down. And all the while on those 13 years, I kept working on the graphic novel too. So that's where I'm at now. I'm trying to finish my graphic novel, my one and only graphic novel.
All right, Cosmic Odyssey, a classic DC story you were a part of with Jim Starlin and Mike Mignola.
Yep.
What was your process coloring Cosmic Odyssey?
Well, that was one of the Blue Line jobs that was DC was doing. I had done a couple of Blue Lines with Howard Chaykin first. I did for First Comics, there was the Times Square graphic novel, and then I did Howard Chaykin's Black Hawk miniseries, and I dialed in how to work on the Blue Lines, and then Cosmic Odyssey came up, and I've known Mike Mignola since he was a young fanboy coming around to the Baycons, showing me. I actually have some of his art that I bought from him because I said, hey, this guy's pretty good. But I was coloring at the time, and he was just trying to break in. So along the way, after doing a little bit of the Blue Line work for DC, I'm not sure who recommended that I color it, but I was always kind of in that category that when they're looking for somebody who can handle Blue Line, they would always call me. So it worked out, but it was kind of cool to get to work with Mike after all those years.
Okay, and then you've mentioned quite a few different technologies and methods of coloring. Mm-hmm. Explain a little bit more, and then kind of like lead us into the Photoshop era. Like, where did it come from, and then how did it get to Photoshop?
Okay, well, originally it was and this is actually, this is something that I'm actually going to be trying to put a YouTube thing together about, because I don't know if you guys know that I had a show at the Comic-Con Museum in Balboa Park last year.
No, I did not.
Yeah, well, I'll have to send you a link to the little PBS video that they did of it, because it was cool, but because my show got voted one of the most informative shows in San Diego for the year.
Oh, absolutely great.
And what it talked about is called From Big Dots to the Digital Universe, the evolution of comic book coloring. And I took it back to the old school stuff where you'd have to write codes on it, and you had 64 colors. And then as it went on with the Hulk magazine, that became full color. And that's where I always hated writing the codes on my coloring. I thought it messed it up. Who likes to look at numbers? I mean, when you do beautiful color. But I've been lucky enough that a lot of my work was able to go into full color. And they used to call it process color. I mean, there's like hand separations and then process color, which the only places you'd ever get to have full color were occasionally on a cover. They'd take a picture of a painting, but with the Hulk, that was one of the first regular comics that had full color on the inside. And then what happened was Pacific Comics came along. Okay. You remember those guys? I mean, you may not. You probably.
No, I don't remember Pacific. No.
Well, they had they were the first company to give royalties to the artists. And Jack Kirby did a series for them, Captain Victory.
Oh yeah,
I heard of Captain Victory. Yeah.
Neil Adams did Miss Mystic. Mike Grell did Star Slayers, I guess, or Star Slayers, I believe it is. Anyway, but Pacific started off doing regular flat color too. That's what they were doing. But Bruce Jones started doing these anthology horror stories. Okay, and like Twisted Tales and Alien Worlds was one sci-fi and one. He was kind of trying to emulate the old EC comics. Okay. But so what they were doing, I was coloring for them because I colored a couple of those, but they gave me instead of one thing I always hated coloring on, which unfortunately is just the regular old Xerox. Okay, I mean, but they would give me the photostats, and since I knew how to blend on one, you're familiar with a old sci-fi EC guy, Al Williamson. He's kind of Flash Gordon and stuff like. You can look him up. But he had done a short story for one of these books, and they were going to do them all flat color. But since I hated doing that, I put like a clear acetate, and I would write those numbers on the overlay. Then Al apparently lifted it up and told the Shanus brothers, who owned Pacific Comics, says, you guys should just shoot this from this full color. And they loved it. It came out so good that they switched their entire line to doing full color comics instead. And then after that, they figured out a way that it's kind of like the poor man's blue line. They called it a gray line system.
Okay.
And this, I'm not sure who actually invented it, but what it was, you draw in the exact same size of the printed copy. And what it was, you'd have a photostat with a 10% version of the actual line art on it. Then you'd have this acetate overlay that you would, like one of the things that I sent you guys, the Airboy cover, that's a gray line.
With the heap? With the heap, right? It has the heap.
Yeah, the heap, that's the one, yeah. But so that has an overlay and then you get full color underneath. And so that was kind of the interim thing. And then DC started doing the blue line when The Dark Knight came out. So The Dark Knight was their first of those really, and maybe Ronin might have been too done that way.
Right, yep.
And then came along, I did Black Hawk, I did Cosmic Odyssey, Gilgamesh 2, and Twilight. Those are the ones. But okay, all along the while there, was trying to figure out the computer stuff.
Right.
I mean, and the very first comic story ever colored using a computer anywhere in the world. I mean, if anybody can prove me wrong, go for it. But it's in Mr. Monster number 5. It was a little backup story, and that I would never try that technique again because it was so hard to get to it. But it's what they call in a lot of the business proof of concept. I proved that the computers could color a thing. So then when I found the real software, and then Akira hit, then apparently Photoshop, was actually designed by a guy at Lucasfilms.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Industrial Light and Magic, yeah. The very first guy, when you look at Photoshop, Thomas something or other, well, he was working up at ILM at the time. And then that software got bought by Adobe. So what was happening was, and here's the big difference. In our old software was a vector-based thing, much more like an Illustrator program.
Okay.
So that you could do it in this size and you could blow it up any size you want. But the files were very tiny. Whereas Photoshop is a bitmap thing, where you take all this stuff as bitmap and it takes an enormous amount of memory. And back in the day, memory used to be $50 a megabyte. And you would need, for mine, my first machine, check this out now. I don't know if you guys, how tech you are. I had a IBM 286 with 4 megabytes of RAM and a 40 megabyte hard drive.
A 40 megabyte hard drive.
Mm-hmm. That was it.
And when was this?
1988.
Damn, though.
See, so look how fast it's changed.
Yeah.
But anyhow, but then within a couple of years, what really happened was that the image guys were making so much money. Okay. Money was no object when they're trying to build machines. Even though it was early Photoshop, like Alex was talking, they would do that. But all the image guys were so late always that they needed to have their own in-house coloring departments, so that they could be sitting there waiting until when Rob Liefeld finished his page, whatever, it'd go out the door. But so eventually Ole Optics, they had all these guys, and that's when the Alexes and the Brian Haberlins of the world and all those guys who are Photoshop oriented, kind of the industry changed. And now my software back in the day is a footnote in history. I use Photoshop now myself.
Okay, I'm about to say, did you migrate over to Photoshop eventually?
I did. It took me a decade to learn it because I think I had blocks against it. And I just ran across in 94, I did an exhibit at the Comic-Con. We called it the Color Exploratorium. And what we did is we took machines down there. I set up my Cod Barrett systems, and then we had a Photoshop thing, and we did what we called the color shootouts.
Really? So you guys had little duels?
Yeah, we had duels. Yeah.
I did want to go back to Cosmic Odyssey just for a minute, and I didn't know that you went that far back with Mike Mignola. What was the workflow process? You talked a lot about the coloring process and the different strategies you guys use. I think you said that was a blue line technique for Cosmic Odyssey. But what about the workflow between the actual pages and then you getting them in that kind of conveyor belt system?
Sure. All right. Well, what would happen is that Mike would turn in the artwork to DC. DC would then have their production people turn it into what they would send me is a blue line page with just basically the artwork on just a kind of non-photo blue on a page, and then they would send me a black version of that, and then on the blue line one they would have an acetate overlay. Okay, so this is I couldn't find a Cosmic Odyssey page right off the top, but I do have some. But this is one of Howard Chaykin's Blackhawk pages, okay? But as you can see, there's that, and then underneath is where all the color is.
Got it.
And then, because one of the problems with these blue lines is that the acetate would tend to shrink.
Yeah.
Because of the water. So that's why they would send me another black line one that was printed on the same kind of paper, because they would shoot the actual black for the issue off of that.
So those colors, that's actual paint and stuff. That's not.
Oh yeah. So okay, well, just to let you know the process about that, what I would do is I had a guy that if you're using airbrush, there's this stuff called Frisket. And Frisket is kind of like a tacky film you put over the whole thing, and then you cut out the lines around it, and then you peel off an area, then you can spray it, but it protects everything else from that, so you're not overspraying. So I had a guy who was my Frisketeer, like a mouseketeer, and he would just Frisket all my pages. So the first thing I would do is just go in and just airbrush everything that I wanted. And I've actually saved a lot of that Frisket from all these different things. I'm going to be using it as kind of background. They're kind of the ghosts in my Armature graphic novel is called Ghostorama. And so, but the Friskets are going to be some of the ghosts in the background. So it's going to be kind of a little who's who thing. Anybody who maybe knows some of my work, like if you look at some of the characters and these silhouette kind of things in the background, you'll be able to go, oh, wait a minute, that's Superman and Hawkman from Cosmic Odyssey. Because I've got all of that stuff left. I got Akira stuff. And that's another thing I was thinking about doing. Well, actually, can I just tell you a little bit about the process with Akira? Which
absolutely, go ahead.
That was way different. So what it was okay. Normally, as the colorist, you're the last person in line, okay, on a monthly deadline. So if the writer's a day late, the penciler's a day late, inker, letterer, etc., guess who's got to make up all that slack? The colorist. They've wasted 4 of your days that you had. So instead of having a week to do something, you got about 2 days to get it done. And it's always a pain in the ass because you're the last person in line. But it has to get out the door. Okay. With Akira, this was the first time I'd ever worked on a project where there was already over 1,000 pages in the can. And from Otomo, I got these giant packages. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of pages, because they would send me 3 of each in case I made a mistake. But they're on this really good paper, beautifully, because they had to flip, because in manga reads from the back, they had to flip it all the artwork. They got rid of all the dialogue. So for the first time in my career, I didn't have to worry about those goddamn word balloons. They're a pain to color around, So it was just pure art on good paper. So I could use my airbrush. I could use paint. I could do things on those guides that I couldn't do on anything else. And I had a big studio at the time, and it was just me there. So what I would do, each issue was 56 pages long. Okay. I think it was bi-monthly it came out. But what I'd do is I'd just lay the 56 pages out on the floor, and then I could look at the story. Because that's another thing. Lots of times when you're working on a deadline, you don't really know what the artwork looks like until the last minute when the guy gets it done. But here I could see, so I could say, oh, that's 20 pages. That's one sequence. Then I change color and it goes to a different thing. And I came up with this concept of color as the silent soundtrack in comics. Wow. I mean, and you could set up themes for your characters. So you could weave these colors in and out, like making melodies, but it was only because I could look at the whole flow of everything, and it made it changed my whole approach to coloring.
Man, what a great story. Okay, I need you to break one more thing down because you've already broken everything down. And, we're collectors, as you can see. Color guides. Okay. Yes. Okay. So color guides is like a thing that people collect now. And I never really quite understood them because they're looks like they're just small printed versions of a page. What are the color guides for? And are they significant? Are they actually one of one or whatever?
Well, here's the deal. Yes. Color guides in the early era were just on Xeroxes. You got just paint it, put the numbers on it, throw away. Nobody really cared about them. They have no value. What I feel like when I got into coloring on the Hulk and stuff, it turned into a whole new thing, The color guide, and there was only about, let's say maybe 12 years, maybe 13 of high quality color guides. They never existed before. Basically, Akira and my other stuff, we would do high quality for the actual process color when we were going to shoot from that. But the color guides were just kind of throwaways. But Ole Optics, and I mean me specifically as Ole Optics, always wanted the color guides to be cool. I wanted it to look good because if I was going to give it to my computer crew, I wanted them to be inspired by it, and I wanted them to try their best to emulate my actual coloring. So like here, I've been posting a few of these things, but here's an example of how a thing can change. From my color guide, I had this kind of warm tones and stuff, but I ended up finally going.
Bring them up a little bit higher for me.
Sure.
There we go. There we go. The Spawn. There we go. Oh, that's a Spawn color guide?
This is a Spawn color guide. Yeah. Oh, I should go. I might have to go grab you another one. I just scanned in. Because basically, but let me just talk to a little bit about color guides. Were not, I think, generally speaking, they really had very little value for a long time. And it wasn't until the blue lines, that's separate though, but the oleoptic style of high quality color guide did not exist until Akira.
Yeah.
And it only lasted until Joe Quesada in about 2002 or 2003 combined the color guide artist with the color separators, and you had to do it all on computer. And it basically eliminated my job, or my color guide job. I could still do color separations, but that's a whole different thing, working on trade. So what I've found is that there are no digital or there are no aftermarket sales things for colorists. I mean, it's all digital. So the guides basically don't exist. And there were only a decade or so of them. And most of the guys who started doing good kind of quality color guides were mostly working for Image, and they were basing it off of the oleoptic style because we had set the bar high. Because once we started doing Spawn, I mean, there was no looking back. They had to rise up to Todd's level. You know, and Todd and I had been talking about working on something since he was doing the Hulk way back. He was supposed to do a Hulk graphic novel, and I was going to color it for him. But since that fell through, I mean, and then when he started doing Spider-Man, right, I begged Marvel to please let me color it, but they were too cheap. We cost too much. So they wanted their old flat color.
Imagine that, man. Wow.
Steve, this has been a wonderful interview. We're on our very last question. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you want the fans to know that we haven't talked about? Any upcoming appearances? Any new projects?
Sure. Okay. Well, yes, there are a couple. I'm going out to the Heroes Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's one of my favorite shows. I mean, I just love it out there. And I am still working toward trying to get my graphic novel done. I mean, out of 150 pages, I think I have about 85, 90 of them done now. So, and then along that line, one thing about this, it's not going to be normal. I'm actually building sets that I can light. I don't know if you can see some of the stuff behind me.
Yeah.
See that roller coaster thing there? That's one of the silhouettes from the Ghostorama graphic novel. And I'm designing some things because what I found, let me just say something about this. One of the things that has kind of bothered me about most people coloring comic books is that they study other comic books. They don't study reality.
Yeah.
And I have always been out there. I call it, there's the one universe of light. And I look at how lighting affects things. I look at how sunsets go, and I think that my entire style, I dubbed comic realism. I mean, I can sometimes go off into comic expressionism where it's random colors, but I generally try to incorporate a sense of reality into my work, and so that is kind of, I think, been at the essence of things. So that's why I'm building sets, because I found that if you can build a three-dimensional thing and then take the lighting and move it around, it'll show you things that you never could have thought of just in your head. It's just like, because that's why I think that, anybody who really cares to do good color, I think, has to look at the real world, and then along those lines, I'm going to show you one more thing.
No problem.
This is a book that I did called The Guide Dog for the Coastally Curious. And these are my Armature comic strips, but I did a kind of a local thing for here. It sold out, sold really well, thousands of copies. I'm about to do a second version of it for here, but people have liked it so much that they want me to do guide dog books for their towns. Like there's one in Asheville, North Carolina, that I'm going to try to do, and then another one, a little ghost town called Jerome, Arizona. The guy who used to live here loved this book and said, "Man, you got to come here and do this because there's 1 million tourists a year go through that little ghost town," and that's kind of a nice captive audience, that's outside of comics.
Yeah,
I got a bonus question, Steve. Yeah. Now, you've been a pioneer. You actually visualized the possibility of computers coloring comics way back in '78.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see comics now? Because pretty much everything is digital now, especially on the monthlies, right?
Yeah.
Where is the future headed with comics now in your eyes?
That's a very interesting question that I'm not sure I know, because all the guys they're leaning toward more painterly color, which is wonderful, but it's a lot harder, and they don't pay enough for people to really do that. So what I'm really afraid of? I'm afraid AI is going to take over coloring, because it'll be easy. They'll just say, "Hey, here's the costume colors, blah blah. Here's the lighting." It'll be able to can fill in the blanks quick, and it's colorist might be on the way out. But like for me, on my stuff, I'm doing old school, different. That's why I'm trying to do different things, like 3-dimensional things, but not 3D, but I mean actual physical things. And then, okay, one last thing about this. This is kind of important. One thing that Ole Optics had to do, it wasn't that we wanted to do it, we had to develop what was known as cut color. That means because my software was not like Photoshop. My Photoshop, I can tell everybody, is like a 12-speed Maserati, and it can do anything. What we used to do, we had a 3-speed Jeep with a bad clutch, We'd have 3 gears forward and 1 in reverse. And then we had to learn how to make it work. So we learned all the numbers. Now guys work in RGB. We worked in CMYK always, because we had to. So what we do is we blend, because we had top to bottom blends, left to right, angle, and a radial gradation. And that was it. There was no airbrush. We couldn't smooth anything. So what you always would end up with is this little bit of a cut, and hence the name cut color. But what it was that it gave us a kind of a bridge between old school color and the new computer stuff, because especially like the first few years of Photoshop, all the guys doing comic books, I told everybody it reminded me of bad airbrush art on the side of a van from the 70s, It's just crappy, mushy, lens flares galore. God, I hated lens flares, But anyway, but the cut color gave you places where you could have a soft edge and then a hard edge. And I think that was a style that kind of influenced a lot of people. And now I think it's moved on, and they're just more enamored with the painted look now.
Steve, this has been a fantastic interview, man. Thank you for joining us. Man. Just know you always have a home here on the Sig Slayers station. Thank you once again. Well, that's all for our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe and hit the like button. This is Sig Slayers. I'm Mike, speaking for Mark and Steve Oliff. We are out. Peace. Sig Slayers.